news this week. So Sony had their PlayStation 5 showcase this week. And, I think everyone felt like this was going to happen, but yes, they did. They revealed the PlayStation 5 price, pre-order details, sort of, the release date, lots of games, and, lots of other stuff that's around the PlayStation 5 ecosystem, which is really exciting. So as we normally do, we tackle the biggest thing that happened in the event. And I think the biggest thing is really the price of the system. So it does come in, the full-fledged disc model, so just the PlayStation 5, they're referring to it, is $500 US, 750 Australian dollars, which is exactly the same as the Xbox Series X. And the digital edition, which is, like, to me, not that I would ever get the digital edition, but I was super fascinated to see what they were going to price it at. And they priced it at US $400 and Australian $600. And they're both coming out in Australia, US, and other territories like that, Japan, in the 12th of November, and then the week after in the rest of the world. So we're quite lucky, actually, in Australia to be getting it on launch day. So yeah, like, what were your thoughts around the price? Did it surprise you? Did you hope for more, less? What were your thoughts?
Well, I guess my thoughts on this are very different than the Xbox, because I'm going to buy into the Xbox ecosystem. Continue to do that just because I'm an achievement whore. But
see, okay, like you've almost, like I should have written something. I wanted to, like, get your thoughts on, like, is this whole package and some other stuff that they revealed, attracting you to this ecosystem? But it sounds like you're just, like, locked in, you're bolted into Xbox. You're not going to move.
Well, I have a complex where I need to hunt for things that have no value, and they just pop up and they give me some kind of dopamine hit whenever it does. So, because I'm an achievement whore, I need to stay with the Xbox system.
I'll introduce you to a new addiction, trophies, and there's a whole range that you can get.
But similar to how I've done in the past, what I'll probably do is I'll probably end up picking up previous generation PlayStation and catching up on a bunch of those games. So that's the way that I've kind of worked in the past with that. But when it comes to the pricing of the PS5 and the digital edition as well, I was kind of expecting them to, be pretty close to Xbox. I don't know why I was expecting them to maybe be slightly more, but the fact that they match them on the top level SKU is interesting. The digital edition, I think a lot of people were expecting that to mainly only be, let's say, in US dollars, like $50 less or something. The fact that it's $100 less is pretty crazy, because from what I know, the only difference between the two systems is the lack of disk drive.
Yeah, so look, and, I wanted to speak about this prior to the prices coming out. And I think if the podcast had been running longer, we would have already covered this. But, for me, it didn't shock me at all. And if anything, I was expecting that or even more of a discount. And you just got to think about it from a business sense, right? Like, ultimately, the attachment rate on these kind of consoles is, like, just ballpark, like 6 games per console. And for Sony and for Microsoft, if they are getting purchases on digital, the amount of money that they make on that versus physical is just, like, magnitudes apart. So for them, like, in the wash, like, actually discounting the console even another 50, 60, 70 bucks, because let's be real, like, the disc does not cost that much. Like, the disc drive, like, it's probably, I don't know, like a $20, difference in terms of how much it's costing them for a component. Probably not even that, but let's just even be generous and say 20. But driving people down a purely digital route, where, they have to engage with the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store to get like titles, and they're getting that sweet 30% off every single title, including, if they're new to the system, okay, buying all those games. So they're not taking advantage of used game prices or, other ways to get games cheap. They're going to make all the money back really, really quickly. Like, if not more,
Yeah, just from what we'd heard across the last, let's say, 6-7 months about the cost of the components for the PS5 being quite troublesome for them, and trying to drive that price down, I'm still surprised that it's $100 less. Like,
I think it was always going to be a differential of about $100 at least. It's whether,
a lot of people,
your point around the top end.
a lot of people were thinking that it was probably going to be a less of a gap between them. That's all,
Nah,
and so that well, I
it was,
kind of understand where they're coming from because the core components outside of the disk drive are apparently the same. So if
yeah, but
the
you
problem,
don't price things on components. That's you don't price. You price it on perception. You price it on what you can make in the long run.
yeah, I
You
know,
don't
I'm
just go
still
that component costs $10, so I'll charge a 30% premium on that component. That's almost like irrelevant.
Yeah, I'm still surprised by it though. Like it doesn't matter because
Mm.
I've been listening to this discussions around this for a long time, and a lot of people were actually like I didn't come to that kind of thought myself. It was actually based on what I'd heard a lot of people saying about it, and it just still surprised me. Like when it comes to the Xbox Series S and Series X, no surprise there at all. Even though $299 US is still probably maybe slightly lower than what I was expecting, but it was understandable there definitely. But just because we'd heard so much hullabaloo about the troubles that they had had now, we know that since that started happening, that a lot of regions with the pandemic things started to ease up and manufacturing started to pick back up again and things like that. Like if it didn't, we wouldn't be in a situation to launch consoles anyway, probably. But it still surprises me that there is that much difference. But I do understand what you're saying. When you're talking about price points, it's not just about how much are we making back, how much profit or the break even, whatever it is about how much we can sell and what we can sell it for. But
Mm.
it is still surprising. If anything, maybe the fact that the top level one it matches the Xbox is maybe the thing that's probably a bit more surprising than based on that. I guess those industry murmurs back then, because
Mm.
I wouldn't have been surprised if US that would have been like I don't know if they ever do like a nice clear, like let's say 550 or something, or if it's normally like 549 or some crap like that. But I could see them getting away with a slightly higher bump than Xbox, just simply because people generally, Sony has a very big user base, and they're willing to sometimes spend a little bit more because they know it's a PlayStation, But
Yeah, and I
hey,
think
they matched it. They matched it.
genuinely, yeah, I think genuinely the DualSense has got a lot of tech in it, like probably a little bit like the Joy Cons. So I think genuinely that part is more expensive for them. Like they've even, Jim Ryan, the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, he's sort of said, hey, a lot of the budget kind of went to getting that right, and sort of focusing in on that, and to the exclusion of other things that they wanted to do. Look, I don't know. Like whenever I heard a lot of industry pundits talk about a $50 price differential, I really thought it was really naive. Like a lot of it was, I think, based on when Xbox or Microsoft released the Xbox One S All Digital Edition, the SAD edition.
Hmm.
Um, they released that with a $50 price differential. I think that's a totally different situation economically because they're releasing that product, also for people who already have an Xbox One and just go, you know what, I've got a lot of games in my digital library. I just want to get across, to the next revision without, spending a huge amount of money. So I don't think, and it's also like well into the cycle. So they're not going to be able to capitalize on a lot of the game sales from a digital perspective. So I don't know. Whenever I saw that and I heard people talk about, oh, the component costs this amount, so that much premium, I'm just like, that is not how you price things in business. Like, like you need to look at what the market can sustain. Like,
Hmm.
it almost doesn't matter if a component costs 1 cent. If you can sell it for a premium of $10, that's what you do. That's capitalism. That's how it works. So yeah, like that
I
part
think
didn't
it's
surprise me. But just going back to what you were saying, I would not have been surprised if they said it was 550 and the
yeah,
digital
yeah.
edition was 450. Like that would have, I was almost expecting that. Like, and maybe people get very annoyed with it. But I think one thing that Jim Ryan did say recently was they pretty much locked in 500 US dollars and pretty much worked backwards from that. So, I mean, maybe that's also a reason why it's not as powerful, sort of, in raw numbers as the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, it's the thing interesting, and this is not definitely not news this week, but the fact that both of these consoles are going so hard on having that non-digital option as well
Mm.
like this is truly like it was obviously already on its last legs, but just the retail industry, like physical
Oh yeah.
sales, where this is essentially like it. This is the generation where it dies 100% because like you'll still
Oh, I don't
have
know.
obviously.
I don't know.
I reckon it will be. By the end of this
Mm.
generation, essentially, I think we'll be past that. Not to say there won't be ever physical, but I think as not so much something in Australia like a JB Hi-Fi where they've got it's one part of their offering. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
standalone game stores. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Dedicated ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and like obviously we're seeing the news about EB game. Sorry,
GameStop.
a
Yeah.
GameStop, yeah. So which is the equivalent over in the US, just like the amount of new stores, and they've got obviously a lot more problems going on. But it's like it's a clear narrative for them, which is unfortunate in some ways, but it's just the nature of how things have gone, and
Mm.
it's we've talked about it before. It's happened to movies, happened to music
Yeah.
before then, and so it's just a natural progression.
Well, and you look at PC games. Like when I built my PC, it doesn't even have a DVD player or anything. Like the
Same,
case
same.
doesn't even support that. Like there's not. I don't even know. I haven't really looked at the case properly, but I don't think. Yeah, I can even put one in this case. So, and look, I don't really lament that, but for whatever reason, video games to me, the physical element of it is like integral, and I almost always prefer buying physical, like over digital. And yeah, I don't know. I don't see it ending in the next generation. Definitely the one after that won't have discs or anything physical at all.
I'm
But
talking standalone outlets. I think by the end of generation, but not the multi department ones.
oh no, I'm talking about the actual consoles. So like the PS6 and the Xbox, whatever bizarre name they give the next generation if they make that generation.
Xbox
Like
Two.
I feel like I feel like they'd still have a disc drive. But you know what? Maybe what they'll do is they'll just have an optional add-on for the console to play discs or something weird like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's like 7 years from now. just going back to this, like I genuinely think the Series S for the Xbox is so compelling in the US, and it annoys me in Australia that if you do the conversion, so you just basically take the US price, you have to add GST. People who don't do that is stupid. Like they don't have sales tax in the pricing in America, so you do pay sales tax depending on your state in America. So you have to add GST on it. So once you take a US price, add GST, convert it to Australian dollars, the Series X, PS5, and PS5 digital are all like basically priced in with no margin, which is pretty good, right, for Australian context. Whereas the Series S, it's an extra $50 that they've added on to it. So if you just translate the raw numbers, it should be $450 Australian, but it's $500. And to me, in Australia, $500 for an Xbox Series S, which is like underpowered, versus a PlayStation 5 digital for $600, that's just like a no-brainer. Like I don't know. Like I get, if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, if you're in the Sony ecosystem, it probably won't matter to you as much maybe. But I don't know. I look at it and I'm like, I feel like a misstep. 450 is just such a more attractive number than 500, especially when it's close to that $600 figure on the PlayStation 5 digital.
Oh, look, I agree, but I think the Series S is almost like it. The audience for that is so different than any of the other three. Like I
Mm.
see the other three as obviously the Series X and then the top level PS5. I've got to think of a better way to say that. Just the PS5.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
called the PS5, which I actually
yeah.
like that they've done that.
Oh, I know it is. I just like in my head, I'm like, how am I saying this? But yeah, the PS5 and the Series X, like they're to me, they are essentially the same audience in many ways with slight differences. The PS5 digital is slightly different on a bit of an offshoot on that, but the Series S to me is really targeting a different thing. But I completely understand. Like there's people that are just in a situation, what console am I going to buy for Christmas for the kids?
Yeah.
And at that point, it is like there is a comparison to be made. I think that these are launch prices, so I think it'll be interesting to see where the pricing is at. Let's say in 18 months or so, or 2 years, because I think at that point it'll kind of there's a long there's a long way to go till then, but I think then things will be probably a bit clearer about where the pricing falls, for the rest
Mm.
of the generation.
And look, they've taken very distinct strategies. Like the PlayStation 5 digital versus PlayStation 5 is literally the same except a disk drive, whereas the Series S and the Series X, as we said last week, it's significantly underpowered. Now, targeting almost like a different resolution, which I think is a really cool way to think of it. It's just, hey, if you're playing on like a 1080p setup or a 1440p setup, you don't kind of need the Series X, in my opinion, outside of the disk drive. So it is interesting to me that there are different strategies. I don't know. It really, I know it sounds trivial to say like $50, but to me, that $50 difference has kind of put me off the Series S, because I might have eventually got a PlayStation 5 and then maybe had a Series S on the side, just to unlock Game Pass and everything like that. But yeah, being 500 versus 450, I don't know, it's very unappealing the way they've structured it.
But it also depends on what you're getting it for, because you've talked about, the Series S might be a Game Pass machine, and at that point, you're going to quickly make up that $50 on what you would have purchased outright on the other console.
Well, I shouldn't have to make up the $50. Like they've added that in as a tax,
I know that, but I'm just trying to find, I'm not trying to convince you, because I honestly, it is what it is. It's more, I think that in the long term scheme of things, like $50 isn't probably going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I mean, it sounds like we've already revealed our hands, but you're not interested at all in the PS5 or PS5 digital. It sounds.
No, only because I'm just weird, and I generally always I've always been that with PlayStation ever since the first one, where I will always get into it like a generation late, and I'm a bit late on that when it comes to the PS3, definitely. But when it came to PS1, PS2, that's exactly the way I did it. And the way that I also filled in the gap about the Final Fantasy games that I hadn't played, and a lot of the big hitters like Metal Gear Solid games that hadn't made it at that point to any other consoles. And it's a bit different now, I think, because we're seeing a lot of this stuff get re-released and there's backwards compatibility and things like that. But there's still a whole bunch of PS3 and definitely PS4 games that I haven't played that I still plan on playing. But so that's the way I'll be doing it. And given that they announced essentially, we do have at some point at a note here, probably in the next section, the whole backwards compatibility thing. It doesn't really make sense for me to get a PS5 if I'm planning to play those older games anyway. So.
Well, I'd almost argue the opposite, which is like it doesn't almost make any sense to get a PS4, because if you get a PS5, then you'll be able to play all the PS4 games practically. And
no, so I'm looking to play I'm looking to play PS3 games.
Well, you can't play PS3 games on a PS4.
Yeah, that's why I'll be getting a PS3. That's what I'm saying. I'm actually late on that.
So we'll chat in 10 years when you get a PS5.
Well, that's the point. Is I said like I'm catching up by that, and that's why if the PS5 was back to the PS3, that's honestly probably a pretty easy decision to make. Maybe not right away, but I'm just the kind of person I love playing older games. I don't have with very few exceptions, I don't have that like jarring, this game looks and plays really outdated, and that's just me. So I'm cool to go back and play, especially you're talking RPGs. Like a lot of that stuff is turn based and things, so it doesn't really matter as much if the camera's not great. But can I ask, Intergot, say I wanted a PS5, how would I currently go about getting myself one?
You'd have to tune into our Twitter feed, because I've been blasting links where available. It has been a shit show, to put it simply. Like in Australia and in the US as well. Like in the US, I think it's even worse. In Australia, I think the Australian way is kind of like we just expect it to come out randomly, and I don't know why, but I think it's just a lot of the marketing hubs for these companies don't have a huge presence in Australia. So, Nintendo is really just a sales distribution channel in Australia. Like, there isn't really a big staff there. So, if they kind of go, oh, hey, it's on pre-order now, everyone in Australia just goes, oh, yeah, okay, and just scrambles. And it was a nightmare. But in the US, it was shocking, because Sony actually said, don't worry about it. It's going on pre-order tomorrow. And a lot of people just said, all right, I got other things to do. And then randomly, almost all the retailers put it up for pre-order and it got sold out. So that was in the US, which I think was way worse. But even in Australia, yeah, like it went up. Like I shot out the links to some mates. One of our mates ordered a PS5 and then, yeah, just like got sold out within, it felt like 10 minutes, not even potentially.
So from what I heard, so they had the showcase and they didn't mention anything about pre-orders in the showcase, but right after the showcase,
correct,
the news about that date pretty much first came from Jeff Keighley. Is that right?
Yeah, more from the US, but he was interviewing the head of marketing for Sony, like Sony Interactive Entertainment. But whenever I say Sony, I mean the subdivision where they look after PlayStation. And they said, yeah, don't worry about it. It will be on sale tomorrow. I mean, it kind of does give you the context that as powerful as companies are like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, the retailers do their own thing, and there's no control over them saying, don't do that. So yeah, you're kind of burning a bit of a relationship there, but I think it becomes a bit of a, hey, we just want to sell out our allocation. Who knows if it will sell out, COVID, etc. So I think some of them just pulled the trigger and then, as soon as one breaks that date, like they all just go, stuff it. Like we're going to do it as well.
And
so I think that was bad. That was bad because people didn't expect it. So people are really annoyed about it, fairly, I'd say.
Do we know whatever happened with the whole register for a chance at pre-order via PlayStation directly?
I think they're still doing that. It's really weird. You know what? It's been funny, hasn't it? Because there's been a lot of pre-orders in the last few weeks for lots of different products. Like we have had, not that we have spoken about it, but the NVIDIA 3080 series of graphics card, they have had crazy pre-order things. Game & Watch, that ran out really quickly. So yeah, and with the Australian one, like what I would say to people is, also focus in on, the not smaller, but the players that don't pay as much attention. So the Targets and Big W's, a lot of the times, I don't know, they're just very haphazard and they like launch their pre-orders and then it runs out and then they I don't know, find new allocations or new stock and then they'll update it. So I even posted on Twitter yesterday, hey, Big W, you can pre-order it again. And people just aren't aware of it because, they don't make a big hullabaloo about it. And it's, like things like EB Games, JB Hi-Fi, they get all the attention. And, EB Games, so that's like the GameStop for us in Australia, they sold out on the launch day PS5s. Then they sold out on all the 2020 PS5s. Then they started selling 2021 due PS5s. And then now they've just said,
that's ridiculous.
We're not taking any more pre-orders. Because I think they realized that it's going to be like 3 months before people can get their PS5.
A 2021... actually, I guess when I think about it, it's only 2 months. Yeah, but...
Well, and that's the bizarre thing about this whole thing, right? Because normally we would hear this news at latest, say, June, like E3, and, for November launches and the new consoles. But this has just been an odd year, and it's been pushed back so much that, yeah, it's such a quick turnaround time. But yeah, look, follow us on our socials. I'll always post it out as quick as possible. I think also outlets like Press Start in Australia, they're pretty good at like getting the word out quite quickly. And you've seen a lot of odd behavior. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the video game store, The Gamesman. It's like a New South Wales based one.
Yep.
So they've got an awesome store. Like, I love their store. They have like a retro museum. And you got to, like, when you're up in Sydney next time, we'll go visit it. It's really, really cool, man. Like, it's a really cool place. Like, they're genuinely passionate about games. I really like them. But I thought this was a bit dodgy. But, fair enough, it's capitalism. They can do what they want. It's nothing illegal what they did. But they had pre-orders. But what they did was, when you pre-ordered, it was like a PS5 plus an extra DualSense controller. Or like a PS5 plus a DualSense controller and like a VR camera or whatever it is. Like, the streaming camera that they're releasing for the PS5. You couldn't just order the PS5 by itself.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it shouldn't be allowed, but I'm sure they've got the ability to do that.
Well, they're allowed to do it, but it's just, it doesn't, like, given how desperate people are, I get it from a business sense, but... I think you get a lot of bad press if you do that kind of stuff, and people were very, very annoyed with them. So, yeah, and like I said, just keep an eye out. Like I think press start's pretty good. I'll keep tweeting on about it, but Big W seems to have stock. Like it seems to come back. The other thing I'd recommend is just go in person to like a JB Hi-Fi or a Big W or a Target and talk to the manager there. Because they often can sort of work something out for you, like, think outside the box a little bit there. Obviously in Melbourne, you can't do that at the moment, which is unfortunate. And one thing I would really warn people is with Harvey Norman, be careful about pre-ordering from them because they have a very long and infamous history of like over allocating and then just canceling people. And they cancel it on the day. People go to collect it. So people have been really annoyed about that, especially with limited items that you can't get again. So I just completely avoid them, and I wouldn't even use them as a backup because I just don't trust it. And just moving